super excited to have Dr. Elizabeth Castle and Madonna Thunderhawk share this evening with all of us today. There's an opportunity here to learn a lot of fascinating remarks. You all were prompted just now to accept being recorded. We will have an opportunity to record the session and then post it on our website for future views for those individuals that were not able to join us today. This program wouldn't have been possible without the support of many entities on the campus. On behalf of the University Student Union, my name is Dr. Freddie Sanchez. I'm the Associate Director of Programs and Marketing. Cheryl Brown, who is also here, is our huge collaborator with the Women's Research and Resource Center. So Cheryl, welcome. We have Dr. Scott Andrews, our Director of our American Indian Studies Association Department. So our chair for the department, Dr. Scott Andrews, welcome. Our American Indian Studies Student Association also participated in the development of this program, and so we thank our American Indian Student Association for contributing to the program. And so with that, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Perfect. So the purpose of today's program, like I mentioned, the University Student Union, the Women's Research and Resource Center, our American Indian Studies Department, and the American Indian Student Association. Thank all of you for attending today. Today you will participate in a brief screening of the documentary film Warrior Woman, the story of an American Indian movement leader, Madonna Thunderhawk, who were graciously under our presence today. Dr. Elizabeth Castle, the film's director, will facilitate a dialogue with Madonna Thunderhawk for a discussion and a Q&A later. You will also have an opportunity to learn even more about Native American rights. Dr. Blaylock, thank you for joining us today, who will serve as today's moderator and facilitates today's discussion. And thank you, Dr. Mark Villaseñor, a member of the Fernandeño Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, for joining us today and welcoming us into your land. As you can see from the overview of the program, we do have a land welcome, the screening of the movie, the moderated discussion with Elizabeth Castle, and then an opportunity for all of you to engage with us and ask questions directly to Madonna, and actually directly to Elizabeth Castle. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, Mark. Oh, before that, I do need to mention some community guidelines that I was almost forgetting. We want you, as we go through the program today, to really respect and honor people's experiences. We will be hearing from Madonna's experience and through the film and through Elizabeth's perspective as a director, and so we want you to do that. We want you to learn, and if you learn some new things here and things that might have not been taught to you or things that were never really addressed, we want you to unlearn and relearn some of the new experiences. If at any point you join us in a conversation, start using I statements. Is important for us to have that conversation. There's a motto that we go through in the student union that we labeled the Vegas rule. And I don't know where my voice is going, but it's gone. What we say here stays here, and what we learn here leaves here. So we want to make sure that you learn something and that you move away with it. We want you to take space and make space. There's quite a number of us here, and so if you find yourself being the only one speaking, allow others to join us in the conversation. Also, we want all of us to treat each other with courtesy and respect, and utilize the chat function. Dr. Blaylock will be monitoring that later on in the program, and so if there's an opportunity to join us later, feel free to do so through the chat function or the microphone when we open it for you. All right. With that, let's go ahead and have Mark join us today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Villaseñor, as was mentioned by Freddie today. I am the current Vice President for the Fernandeño Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, and I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of not only my tribe, but also the two other tribes within Los Angeles County, one being the Chumash and also the Gabrielino to our east. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. And it's a pleasure, it's my pleasure that you invited us to celebrate individuals like Miss Thunderhawk. You know, in our community, we have a lot of strong women and a lot of, you know, influential women. In my family alone, the last person to own the property of Encino, which we call Sitconga, was actually my great grandmother. We had a history of female leaders, and you know, it does me a great honor and privilege to welcome everyone, and also honor Miss Thunderhawk in here today. So I wanted to sing a welcome song, as is in our tradition. This song basically means, Bako means enter, and then Gema means come. And what you're saying is come enter this place, come here with me in that regard. So I'm gonna sing this song in honor of welcoming everybody into the lands which CSUN resides. Bako kima, bako kima, bako kima, menai kima, menai kima, bako kima, bako kima, bako kima, menai kima, menai kima, bako kima, bako kima, bako kima, menai kima, menai kima, bako kima, bako kima, bako kima, menai kima, menai kima, bako kima, bako kima, bako kima, menai kima, menai kima. Beautiful. I'd just like to once again thank everybody for allowing me to participate, and welcome all of you here to this wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark, for welcoming us. It is now my honor to introduce our moderator for this afternoon. Today we have Dr. Nicole Blaylock, who will be moderating the conversation with Madonna and Beth. Dr. Blaylock joined the American Indian Studies program as an assistant professor just this fall, so she's all online right now. She received her PhD in school organization and education policy from the University of California, Davis, and her dissertation was titled Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies, Understanding School Practices and the Academic Achievement of American Indian and Alaska Native Students Through a Multidisciplinary Lens. She also holds a master's degree in Native American Studies from UC Davis and a bachelor's degree in biology from Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. Her research and publications include education, mental health, government policy, art, and popular culture from an American Indian Studies perspective. She has written successful grant proposals to fund research, and she even has experience in film and video game production. Dr. Blaylock has experience working in Native communities, having tutored at Chemawa Indian School while an undergraduate in Salem, Oregon, and within the Pascua Yaqui tribe of Arizona, where she organized and supported digital storytelling and reading programs for K-12 youth. And her most recent research project concerns a federal mental hygiene clinic in the 1930s that misidentified Native children across the United States as problematic and damaged, the solutions to which contributed to the intergenerational trauma of communities through the loss of educational and body sovereignty. Dr. Blaylock also explores issues of identity, decolonization, and the politics of contemporary society through both scholarly and artistic practices informed by her mixed heritage as a descendant of the Crow, Cherokee, and Chickasaw nations and Danish and English immigrants. So please help me welcome Dr. Blaylock. Thank you.
Otto, thank you so much for that welcome. Ulihiliste, everybody. Dr. Nicole Blaylock, Takutoa. My pronouns are Naski Ageya, she and her. And I just want to take a moment to also acknowledge, so I grew up in Tolowa Dini, Cow Creek, Umpqua, and Tututni homelands. And I'm zooming in today from Lisenio and Peokuicham land. So I'm just a little bit south of all of you who are up in the LA Basin area down in what we know as Orange County. And I am so honored to be here this evening, moderating and introducing to you all Madonna Thunder Hawk and Dr. Elizabeth Castle. So Madonna Thunder Hawk is a Lakota matriarch and an organizing force behind every modern Native occupation, from Alcatraz, Wounded Knee in 1973 to Standing Rock, the hashtag No Dapple protest. Born and raised across the Osage-Sakoan homelands, she was radicalized in the late 1960s as a force of nature within the American Indian movement and co-founded Women of All Red Nations and the Black Hills Alliance. A powerful voice for Native resistance and sovereignty, Thunderhawk has spoken around the world as part of the global movement for Indigenous rights, serving as a delegate to the United Nations. Featured in the 2018 Peabody-nominated film Warrior Women, which we are here to talk about today, she lives on the Cheyenne River Reservation, where she established the Wasagia Najin Grandmothers Group, works as a tribal liaison for the Lakota People's Law Project, and is the matriarch, of course, behind Warrior Women Project, a collective for the development of scholarship, media, and activism. She is the original gangster granny. And our other guest, Dr. Beth Castle. She works at the intersection of media, scholarship, and activism as a Shawnee-descended anti-racist educator committed to liberating and sharing unknown histories of resistance. She started the Warrior Women Project to preserve the oral histories of Indigenous activists and disrupt the dominant historical narrative through her book, Women Were the Backbone, Men Were the Jawbone, Native Women's Activism in the Red Power Movement. While completing her PhD at Cambridge University, she worked at the White House for President Clinton's Initiative on Race. She co-directed the Peabody Award-nominated film Warrior Women and continues the collective work of the WWP in decolonizing curricula, activist archiving, and community media work. Please join me in welcoming both of these wonderful guests to our event this afternoon. And I believe with that, we are going to take about 15 minutes to look at the first portion of the Warrior Women film.
First of all, I want to ask you guys something. Listen. What holiday is it today? Washington's birthday. And who's he? The first person that says the father of our country. Put your mouth.
What we try to do is preserving and maintaining our language and our ways.
Making our people survive, that's important. I have 3 children myself,
People think Indians always knew that we were powerful, and we always acted that way. Mm-hmm. But we didn't. Everybody accepted the racism. But during that time, people were standing up and saying, hey, yeah, I am Indian. We want to be who we are, not who you are.
Is built on the bones of our ancestors. We have our culture, we have our way of life, we have our language. What we're trying to do is retain it. Retain our right as a people to be Indian.
It was truly an empowering, free time. Watching the women is amazing how they handled everything. Protecting our people and our children's future and fighting, being warriors in that way.
The press, they just automatically gravitated to the men. And who really knew what was going on and was really running the show were the women. We were a movement of families.
Being the daughter of Madonna, she definitely had a reputation of being strong. When someone went to her for help, she did what she had to do to make a difference.
However, we get the job done, whatever it takes. When did you start dancing, Mars?
I started dancing when I was 2.
2? Oh yeah, 2.
Back in the day,
You were just a toddler. You were so cute. I don't know how to explain it. It's just part of who we are, Anybody that's dancing, well, I can only speak for our family. Our tios, they dance for all of us. It has a lot to do with how she's raised. It's just what you do. It's part of it's just who you are. Come on, let's go occupy that cultural center. What's going on here? There's a bunch of Indians trying to stir up trouble. Let's go check it out.
Ames at it again.
Yes, the Ames are at it again. I see we all tinted our hair gray.
My name is Chase Iron Eyes. You think about who we are as the Lakota or Ikche but we're all part of the movement, and it's a system of families that keep who we really are alive. In Indian country, they say, when you want good words, they say invite the men, but if you want something to get done, then bring the women.
My name's Madonna Thunder Hawk, and I'm an old Amester gangster way back, and I'm not afraid of mics. It's the land. The land is priceless, and that's who we are. Once the land is gone, we're going to just be a bunch of brown poor people. What we do as a people, everything is related. It's not just one issue over here and one issue over there. If we can't save our children, why are we trying to save the land? That's our future. So it's all connected and it's all important.
Survival is being able to cope with whatever comes along, and yet being yourself, being what you are, and being proud of it. In Rapid City, South Dakota, they're still glorifying the pioneers who hacked through Indian people to conquer the West. So we have to live with that. We still have to live here with this racism. Regardless of how acculturated an Indian person gets, there's still that inside that doesn't fit. It's fighting.
But isn't what you're doing making this bit inside not fit? Aren't you making them more Indian, making them less able to fit in with an open society outside?
Yeah, you bet. Survival of our people, survival of our way. That's important.
Survival school. Started out for my kids and my nieces and nephews, and then it just mushroomed on us. Pretty soon we just had all these kids coming to our door.
Many of our students are children that have dropped out of the present education system, not only dropped out, but have been forced out.
Survival school was just a big house that my mom rented, and the young people who came there were the ones whose families were involved with the movement. They would come and hang out, and then they just decide to stay. So my education, being an Indian person during that time in the 70s, it was a political education.
Remember our 3 subjects when they said, what are our subjects? It was natural, the earth, taking care of the earth, aka natural resources, and our rights, our legal rights, and spirituality.
I wanted them to respect knowledge, education on what's relevant to us, our lives. Why are our treaties so important? So that we can get our land back and be free. That's right. Remember what you taught us in school about the timber and the natural gas and the water and the fishing, hunting and stuff like that. Yeah. What about it? What's happening with all that today? That the white man is stealing it. That's right. That's right. Still going on today, right? Yeah. So if it's still going on today, then that makes the 1868 treaty relevant today, just as it was back then, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. I grew up in South Dakota, mostly on my home reservation, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. That's when the river was natural. And all the willows grow. Pick the best willows, and we'd peel those willows, and they were our stick horses. And it wasn't, cowboys and Indians, it was just Indians. You could drink water out of the streams and the rivers and stuff. We'd be gone all day, because there's territory.
We'd get hungry, we'd just dig wild onions. Those were the days. Gee, we were just wild on that.
Wild and free.
Wild and free.
When I was in high school, the government built a series of dams all along the Missouri River. We lost almost 1 million acres of our land. The cottonwoods and the willows and all the natural food and everything all went under. That whole lifestyle changed overnight.
Being self-sufficient, going out and picking the berries, all those things, so important the way we're raised.
We had to move about 50 miles west, and it was totally different from where I grew up along the river. Social destruction. How do you fight that?
From day one, when our food changed, it was because the government changed it.
But if it's already tilled, it shouldn't be too hard to get through.
I'm working on getting as many community gardens in as possible. I'm providing tilling services and seeds. Through this garden project, I'm hoping that we can rebuild that relationship to the land. My wildest dream would be getting back to our traditional foods. Our bodies are still very indigenous.
We're looking for a timsila.
And so we need our own foods.
Only take the
Root, not the whole plant. Man, they taste good.
Good, isn't it?
Yeah, they taste good fresh. Well, I have this constant thing that is like, what are you going to do? What are you, What are you doing? Well, how are you going to help your people? What are you doing? They did this, so, you know, the next generation should be doing this. And the next one should be doing, you know, it should always be moving up. There was several Red Power organizations, but they were mostly local or regional, specific to an issue. The American Indian Movement was the most dominant organization at the time. The American Indian Movement started in the late 60s in Minneapolis as an answer to the police brutality that was going on. And then it just mushroomed and came to Indian country, mainly to South Dakota. We were the shock troops. When I refer to the movement, I'm referring to all those hundreds and hundreds of people that were involved wherever we went. When I say we were the visible organizers under AIM.
It's our responsibility. We, in a sense, are giving a legacy to the yet unborn and the young Indian people today.
She comes from the old agency on Cheyenne River that's flooded, so she can never really go home. So I think that's why she's dedicated her life, because she can't really go home. When the movement came, she was just like, okay, this is my home. She had somewhere where she belonged.
Yeah. I didn't even know if you could call it a school. We all live and work together.
When the sun shines, the birds sing as she walks along. What drew me and why I came and stayed was because you saw the best of our people. It was a big family, and I think that's what made it work, and that's was what you brought us from our traditional ways, was that we're all related. And I remember the hair braiding lines we had, because everybody had long hair. So we were constantly braiding hair. And Travis's hair only grew this long ever in his whole life until now. But he'd get in line. And then when he'd come to him, we'd ask him, do you want the ears, over the ears, one braid, tight, up high, loose down low. You know, they all had their own preferences. And what would he say? He'd sit down and go, okay, I want 2 long, thick, black braids. The other important part of it was relearning and getting connected to our spirituality.
The Indian way of life, you don't separate education. You don't separate it from the home life. You don't separate it from your spiritual life. The way you live your life every day is your religion. It's not just, you know, something that has a special day and that's it.
The adults are like, you decide. It's okay to be Christian. It's okay to pray however you want to pray, but you decide. And we all decided that we were going to follow the ways that were given to us.
Okay, wow. There are so many things in this film, even in the first, you know, little segment that we got to watch here today, that are so relevant to the world right now, talking about building relationships with the land, getting back to traditional relationships with the land, talking about things like police brutality, talking about not celebrating indigeneity just on a single day. We of course just kicked off Native American Heritage Month, but of course every day is Indigenous Peoples Day. So very much looking forward to the dialogue that we are about to have. I'm going to go ahead and ask that everybody please start thinking about questions and put them in the chat as we kick off our remarks. Madonna, is there anything that you would like to start us off with before we begin our dialogue?
Well, I just would like to tell everyone how honored I am to be a part of this. To me, it's always an honor to be in a company of young people, because that's where the energy is, and you're a future, you know, so you have my respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Madonna. Okay, so while you're all thinking about what you would like to ask, I'm going to start us off and ask, you know, both Madonna and Beth, can you tell us about what the most immediate issues are that you're working on right now, and what we can do, or what anyone could do to support the issues that you're working on, you know, whether out here as a part of the CSUN community or wherever in the world we are.
Well, the main things we're still working on, you know, Trump brought the KXL pipeline back to life when he took office. So we've been, you know, organizing and working in that area. Right now, the main focus are the man camps that the KXL is building. And one of the camps is fairly close to our reservation border. And the man camps are, they bring, you know, the camps of men workers, and they come from all over the world. And they bring all the deviant behavior with them. We already have a problem with missing and murdered Indigenous women. The trafficking is heavy in our area because of the tourist industry in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and then of course the Sturgis rally, motorcycle rally they have every summer. You know, that the human trafficking just, you know, escalates. So that's an ongoing issue that we have, that we've always had to deal with, but with the man camps happening, that just makes it that much more urgent. And then beside that, of course, the COVID, our tribal government took a stand right at the end of March when we realized that we weren't going to get any help anywhere. They put out the, you know, requests and what was going on, the different federal agencies. No, there was no response. So our tribal government got organized, and the fact that we do not have the healthcare facilities for any kind of an epidemic, let alone a pandemic, we realized that we had to protect our borders. So we have checkpoints, health checkpoints, and the traffic flows, but residents are protected with trafficking facilities. So ways of doing, you know, our protection. So we're able to keep the numbers down. Where the state of South Dakota, we're surrounded by the COVID because it's a red state, you know, and they don't even require anybody even wear masks, let alone anything else, you know. So we're keeping our checkpoints up and stuff. So that's another thing we have to contend with. But of course, those are two of the main issues that are going on right now. But it's always some sort of land related issue that our people have to deal with, besides all the other social ills that come down from the greater society. But what we really need, you know, and I see as an individual of just watching how things have ebb and flow, you know, all these many years, is our people, brothers and sisters nationwide, you know, you step up your work on your land and the protections you need to do, because it's all tied in. We're all dealing with the same extraction corporations, where it come, you know, no matter what it is, you know, water is the main thing now, you know. But other than that, there's timber, there's everything, as well as the land itself. So we have to step up our efforts on our homelands wherever we're at, because that way we're not ever acting in isolation. It's a network, you know, of resistance. So that's mainly what we need. And for the non-natives, we need you to participate in your government. Please get on it and vote. I mean, what happened the other day with the politics, that's amazing. But this, you know, the white supremacists, they still control the Senate, you know. So politics is very, very important for our survival. So yeah, those are the two main issues, I think.
Thank you. Are there ways, even beyond voting, that that you can suggest for people to proactively support Native issues?
Well, just like I said, you know, you have to look to your, you know, to wherever you live, the state you live in, you know, wherever you call home right now. You know, get involved. We need to pull together. For example, the Green New Deal. That's got to be real. That's got to be something that actually happens. And if you don't know what that is, read up on it. And specifically the young people, the young adults, you have to step up, because it's your world. You know, we did the best we could. You know, we stood. We pushed back, you know, from all these many years, you know, we've held the line, but it's yours now. It's your responsibility. And that's the way we look at it. When people say, oh, Madonna, you've been in this for so long. What's your, you know, miracle, whatever, you know? And I kind of laugh it off sometimes, but sometimes I get kind of disgusted, because I think, where are you coming from? You know, you don't understand. It's a responsibility, you know, for your children and your grandchildren, your descendants, because that's what our ancestors did. Look how they stood, look what they went through, so we can walk around here with our beautiful brown skin, you know. So we have an obligation. Then there's no time. There's no time. You just got to get on it, stay on it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Madonna. Beth, I'm going to turn to you for just a moment. Could you tell us a little bit more? You and I were chatting about this long, beautiful relationship that you've had with Madonna and with the Warrior Women Project. Could you tell us a little bit more about the beginnings of that project and where it is now, and what, you know, any of us here could do to become involved or support that work?
Sure. Thank you. You know, Zoom life is a crazy life, because you have some freedom, because there's things I can say now, because I can just pretend like I'm not looking at any of your faces. You know how you read a face, whether people are making stink face or who do you think you are face. And, you know, I'm gonna, but then you can't, you know, I can't feel the love or the vibe, but, you know, I'm also smiling because I know Madonna's in that bomb dropping mode now. So everyone, you know, get ready for the truth. It's going to hit you in the face. But so 22 years ago, I think the official story is that a time machine brought me to Cheyenne River, and I was a blonde hippie who came out of a time machine. That's funny to her. To the rest of you, it sounds crazy, but what it is it was you know, we all have our different origin stories, and I don't have one that's quick, you know, but I did meet Madonna 22 years ago when I was working on a dissertation at the place, you know, I use I use this reference, and it sometimes goes wrong, but you know, at Cambridge University, which is like where they make the historical sausage, you know, it's like they literally grind it out. And when I said I wanted to learn, I wanted to find this, you know, the stories and learn from the experiences of women in the Black Panther Party and the American Indian movement. It was like five elder white men, and they were small, and they were all wearing gowns, and they just, you know, looked at me and were just like, well, what on earth is that? Like, what are you talking about? That's just, you know, 5 angry women in a room, Elizabeth. That's not history. So it was a great start to this long-term relationship where, and the reason it's relevant and why I wanted to bring it up is that from the very beginning, working together, and what the Warrior Women Project has become is about doing community accountable research and work that completely flips the script, so that we're working from a space, you know, and there's a lot of academic work out there, and I still sometimes, you know, work as a professor, but right now I keep moving out of the spaces that become too politicized. So I was like working at the White House, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to get fired, so I better move on to academia, because apparently I thought that was less political. And then after that went, like, you know, even more sideways. We're now just on our own, trying to create this space where we have a huge collection of oral histories that are done about a historical moment that is just unknown to most folks, other than a lot of Indian people who are going to look at it and say, that's my grandma, or that's what I know, that's the experience I have. And how do we create something that can move all the way from, you know, the experience of one individual doing that extractive research model of what a dissertation is, to 20 some years later creating a film that allows us to create a bigger platform for all of these women who, you know, who are now showing everybody, as we see more, you know, public leadership, political leadership of Native women, for example, you know, and that can exist in this country with unacknowledged, unrecognized genocide that, you know, can't be controlled anymore, but we still have a, you know, we're in that something else space, right? Like, it's still amazing how we can have that duality of like more awareness than we've ever had, but in that flashpoint of a moment where the American narrative has, you know, built on the blood and bones, you know, can't sort of put those together. So the Warrior Women Project has a lot of different components to it, but decolonizing curricula, and making all of it accessible, because more than anything, you know, it is important we come up with wonderful, fancy ideas, but do they get back to communities and make a change for people? So, you know, there's so much to say, and I'm definitely doing a Zoom moment where I come back to earth and say, you know, there's like 120 people on this, and what do they want to know from us?
Thank you.
So that was me stopping.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I love how you kind of started our conversation here of the importance of women's voice in spaces. You know, you spoke to it in your academic space, as well as the political space as it's currently changing. Madonna, could you tell us a little bit more about Native women leaders and what that means, and maybe why it's different than the dominant understanding of leadership in what we currently know as the United States?
Well, you know, just from my perspective of being involved in different areas of, you know, as a people, you know, what we do, tribal, you know, on a regional level, state, and an international level, you know. The whole issue of women and their involvement, all that was never, I mean, it was from the outside society. It was from American society, where the women had to get organized and battle their way for recognition, and we don't want to make the coffee anymore and that type of thing, you know. We just kind of all stood back and watched all that go on, you know. We've never had that. We were totally matriarchal societies before colonization, and that was, you know, by law, and American Indian policy was taken away. We were forced into patriarchy, but it, you know, still, you know, at home and in the communities, you know, it's not an issue of, well, the women, you know, make all the decisions. So that isn't even talked about. That's just what happens, and everyone knows it, you know. And the men, you know, they don't have. I don't ever individually. Yes, maybe there was somebody that was, you know, trying to be macho and all that, or I don't know, but it didn't happen in my extended family, you know. But there was all this. It was just total respect. You know, I mean, that's your mother, you know, and your sister and your grandmother and, you know, and our sons, you know, nephews. It was just automatic. They had that respect. They treated everybody the same. You know, it wasn't a big deal. So it was kind of, you know, I used to just have to search around for words when they'd ask me things like that, because I think, you know, basically didn't want to say it out loud, but I don't know what you're talking about, you know. In your world, that's the way it is. Women have to fight for recognition and, you know, up the ladder, you know, whatever. But so yeah, we saw that, you know, when we had to deal with the American society, for example, back in the 60s and 70s, the media and the federal agencies, they would automatically go and, you know, ignore the women and deal with the men. So we got to get a lot of work done because the attention wasn't on us, you know. All the policies and the things that the American Indian movement, we decided we were going to do when we were young and full of all this energy, we were able to work on it. And there wasn't ever a lack of leadership, you know. It was just kind of like automatic because it's your family you're dealing with anyway. No matter what I did in my years with the Red Power movement, I always had my children with me. 3 of them growing up. They grew up in the movement, you know, because we weren't separate. I didn't have to look for a child care or a babysitter. That was unheard of in my day, you know? So I understand what's going on because our people are more involved with the American society now, you know, and that's understandable. That's progress. Things change, you know? So I see where many of our women have more of leadership roles as far as government, you know, tribal government and federal. Well, we've always had women in tribal government, but in other like state governments and federal governments. So it, you know, it's in that realm. It's kind of new, you know, for the outreach. But it's the campaigning and all that that's new with the non-native communities because they automatically have backing and support from our people, you know. So that's basically what it's, you know, from my point of view.
And Nicole, could I just add to it real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Just you know, one of the things that's just a challenge is, you know, just language and worldview. We're constantly just in the space where we've got to unlearn, you know, like it's even deeper, like each time we have these talks where we're like, you got to unlearn so much to begin to relearn. And, you know, that's one of the biggest problems is that we have this framework of, you know, when we say women, it still means white women. And, you know, that's too normalized to that. And so that we're always going against that framework. You know, it's still in academia, right? So women's studies is white women's studies, ethnic studies is primarily male focused. And it's not entirely, we just know that, let's just say it breaks down that way. And the hard challenge here is, you know, how we can sooner and more quickly get to the space. And that's what we tried to do in the film is be in the center and put that experience of at the center and let other things be at the periphery. And that's part of the challenge. And understanding, you know, the word that we call leadership now, because usually it's dominance and power and a flexion of that, and reframing it's critical. So that's all I wanted to add there.
Yeah, thank you both. There's a related question from Angelique. Angelique, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Sure. Hello, Ms. Thunderhawk. Thank you for joining us today. My question is, in my class, we recently studied about the term Indigenous Feminism. What is your opinion on that term?
What was that again?
In my class recently, we learned about the term Indigenous Feminism. I was wondering if you had an opinion on that term.
Well, I don't know. You know, if it has to do with you know, academic, you know, reference, then no, I don't. You know, I don't really. I mean, that's a whole nother. You know, I don't have time for that, so I don't. You know, I haven't read up on it, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. But in reality, you know, in community, I think it's more, we look at it more accepted nowadays because of the outreach outside of our, you know, Indian communities, outside of our reservations. Then it makes more sense. Then the word feminism makes more sense, you know, but there's no need for it at home that I can see. You know, we've always had, you know, women in tribal politics. I mean, that's just a given. You know, we've always had that. And when in the 60s, when the federal government's policies changed and they started letting people actually be involved in you know, housing and whatever social programs, they started having community boards. We never had that before. You know, so I sat there and watched that as a young woman. I watched that happen, where they would say, okay, now you can all run for a board. You get elected to this board, and then you get to tell that you get to make the policies for the school. You know, everybody's saying, what? You know, Bureau of Indian Affairs never had school boards. You know, that type of thing. So, but it was just automatic that the majority of the members on these boards would be women. You know, and that was, you know, whatever, any kind of economic development programs, whatever it was, you know, that was just an example, you know. And then even today, you know, I sat on our tribal housing board, and I represented my district. And my 4 years that I was on that board, whenever we had community issues or different, you know, they had to, you know, sign lease agreements and that type of thing. Of all the applicants and of all the housing, there was probably, I bet you there was maybe not more than 5, 6, 7 men that were with the head of household name on the lease. And I'm saying this as an example because that goes back to the matriarchy. The camp was always the women's domain. And so we still have that, you know, the remnants of our original, you know, culture and ways and traditions. And that's one of them. And nobody thinks anything of it. That's just the way it is. Okay? Okay.
Thank you, Beth. Did you have anything that you wanted to add on that one?
Well, you know, it's a really huge issue. And just in terms of, to give you sort of an example of some of what I talk about with what we try to do in the Warrior Women Project, about like being in a space where we're trying to continue to produce material and knowledge and usher people's stories into a space where it can, as I say, you know, disrupt the dominant narrative. And in fact, over time, can it replace it enough so that we're not always in the colonial framework, no matter what it is. So where the word feminism, just as long as it exists, as long as we use the F word, we run into this conversation, because Indigenous feminisms as a concept is, you know, born and brought into the world and by incredible Indigenous women scholars, right? But it's still, you know, and I guess this is the point of, there's an article that Madonna was quoted in a long time ago that sort of kicked off, she and Lorelei Decorah, where there was an interview that sort of kicked off the very concept of Indigenous feminism or Native feminism. And, you know, even in that experience, that was an extractive interview. You know, I brought it to her, I read it, and she's like, what is this? You know, so you're seeing your own words, you know, used to build these theories. And the problem is how is that reciprocity? Like, how does it get back to community and then used? And if not, you know, a very daring thing, which is don't do the research, right? Don't explore it unless you're doing it in this collaborative fashion. And so it's a really challenging thing, but it's really important, because if you do that community-based work, then what you bring forward isn't something that is silencing folks. So, you know, that's why Madonna's here, I'm here, and we collaborate. You know, it's we couldn't do these things necessarily separately. But it's also why it's important to be in these spaces, because, you know, I would, very early on, we would go places like when we visited Cambridge, you know, and I was introducing her, and people like, well, who on earth is this? And I'm like, this is my research subject, you know, just to take, well, for British people to take the piss out of this idea that, you know, like, you know, this is how you colonize minds and institutions and education all across the board. So it's a good point, and how you handle it in the classroom is try to keep it real with community when you can. And scene.
Yeah, great. So you started to touch on something that I think is really important, especially for those of us in academia and those of us in a college setting where we're, you know, taking time to learn about stories and to be critical. What you touched on was, of course, getting these stories and disrupting dominant narratives by, you know, injecting these voices into these spaces. Could you, either of you, speak a little bit more about how you see the position of projects like the Warrior Women film in media spaces and in sort of challenging the mainstream consciousness?
It's honestly hard for me to take.
Go ahead, Beth.
I guess the first thing, I would just say a couple of things, and this is for those of you who do Indigenous and Native studies, recognizing that I'm sure you're doing this, is just, you know, there's all different kinds of fancy words for it or frame, but, you know, at your university, in these spaces, asking at any given point, are you engaging in community applied research? Applied research for social change, you know, whether it's scholarship, it just means that you can create partnerships between classroom and community, and apply Indigenous worldview and make it work from that space. And just with the film, I would say it's been a really fascinating experience, because I know Christina King is the co-director of the film. There's tons of people that work on a film, and then, you know, I mean, it's really hard to make arguments of, like, you know, a hierarchy of all the oppressive ways that, you know, the US, you know, monstrosity has erased Indigenous people, but, you know, film and media is still, you know, the best one. Like, it's still so effective. And so I'm trying to, with this film, we're just now getting to the point, even though it's been out 2 years, like, to have these conversations, but even more so, we're just now getting it into Indigenous communities, because the film doesn't really matter if it's not going to be the resource tool on the ground and be accessible. So, you know, the film maybe once or twice says colonization, but we don't say intergenerational trauma. We don't use the I mean, not in a negative way, but we want it to reach to people, and then you can build, there's so much you can build on it. And those are the things that we're working on now. You know, hoping too that that there's just, yeah, there's just so much to do, and that's why we're also like talking to opportunities with young people or folks who want to be involved, because we can't do it by ourselves. But we have a lot of opportunity now, and we're gonna, you get a certain amount of attention because we got funded by a lot of big funders. But when we did things with an Indigenous worldview and style, we dropped out of the track that we were on to be a major PBS film. We are showing in our month this month, and if you can get up at like 7 a.m. on a Saturday, you can see us on the lowest rung of PBS possible. But that's what happens when you like take things out of chronology. If you do just the simple things where you don't spend a lot of time explaining to a non-native worldview what everything is, because that's what it's a natural, like we're doing it now often, right? So that's part of what goes on with that aspect, and we want to see it used in classrooms as much as possible.
Yeah, usually when I'm
great, thank you so much. That is a great segue into a question that I have here from Khan. Khan, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Are you just trying?
Do you mean Hanum, Nicole?
Yes, thank you. I apologize.
No problem. No, I just wasn't sure you were talking to me. I just wanted to know, thank you. It's really nice to be here. And I just wanted to know if we can talk about, we read an article for our class on that has to do with decolonization. And people talk about decolonization in so many different ways. So I was wondering if the speakers could talk about how they see decolonization, not just as a definition, but like how, practices of decolonization, whether it's movement, in the kinds of movement building work that you do, or, teaching or raising children, what does that mean to you? If you could just talk about that a little bit, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I think decolonization has become kind of a catchword now. But we've always talked about that, and we didn't actually know what we were saying about, that was decolonizing, but didn't have that specific term. But, ever since I can remember when I was young, hearing adults talk about, and what they talked about, how they would say it was, they'd say our ways of doing things, as opposed to the rest of the country, And when I was real young, they were real specific. It was a white man's world, They didn't say white people, white women, they said a white man's world. And so those are the kind of words I grew up with, And this colonization, I just learned those kinds of terms when we started doing international work. And so then I thought, wow, So, but ever since what happened up at Standing Rock, when we had the standoff with the federal government and the corporations and everybody else, that's when the word really got, used a lot. And I think people began to understand it more, our people, So now when we use that term at home, for example, they understand what we're saying. We don't have to go into a long discussion of what that really means, Now they know, they understand. So you hear terms like getting off the grid, those types of things, where before we're colonized people, And so we have to not only struggle for survival and to maintain what we have, but we also have to try to get out of the mindset, that colonization brings. So it's a struggle, and it's hard to do, but at least we know now, what that those English words mean, and how it we'll say, wow, yeah, well, we've been doing that all along, but hey, it's got a real fancy name, decolonization, sounds good. But anyway, so yeah, it's effective. It's effective. We're moving on because and I think that's what happened with this latest politics, the white supremacists, you know, taking control of the American government, you know, and the worst of the worst, the Trump, you know, it wasn't so shocking. But what was kind of shocking was that it's just all out in the open now. And when you look at people of color, Indigenous people specifically, you can see, well, we always knew that. We always knew that, you know, that was nothing new, but how it was always portrayed was, well, yeah, you know, that, well, maybe, but, you know, get over it, you know, that type of thing. But now, in this past 4 years, it's been just for everybody to see, it's out there, you know. So I think that really brought home the whole idea that, you know, we don't need to be starting to try to decolonize. We've been trying and we've been doing all these years. You know, the name just caught up with us.
That's such a great way to convey that sentiment, Madonna. Thank you. I think that's a lot of what those of us in these, you know, that are in the academic sphere that we contend with a lot, which is explaining to others how it's not this new knowledge that's coming out. It's really, we now have words and we have visibility, and you know, the Western science ways of thinking are catching up to these things that our communities, our elders, and our youth already know and have known for a long time. So thank you so much for that. As an education nerd, I would love to turn a little more to the survival schools that we saw a little glimpse of in the clip that we watched. And could you talk a bit about the function of doing the survival school with the youth within the context of the movement?
Well, there were a couple of survival schools already in operation in the Twin Cities area. And I think the first kind of alternative type education, you know, that was actually going on at that time. But what happened with us is it started with my son, in fact. He was with me during Wounded Knee. You know, he was only 10 years old, but he, when we got out, when we, you know, was over and we were in Rapid City, and that's where our legal defense committee was located. We had volunteer attorneys and legal workers that came from all over the country, and they just set up this legal defense. And I was a liaison then between the community and the legal workers. And so I learned, I got a, you know, hands-on education on the law and the legal, you know, tactics and all that kind of stuff. And so that was totally amazing. I couldn't believe I was so fortunate, but I didn't realize it at the time, you know. But we had a lot of families that had children that were indicted. And so there was, whenever people would come in for court hearings or whatever, there were families that would come. So we realized then there was a lot of young people, children around that were kind of like hanging around the legal office, you know. They were in school and stuff. And then my son, he said, "Mom, why don't we have our own school?" He said, "I don't want to go to the, you know, regular school." He said, "I don't want to go." So I thought about that and I thought, well, yeah, why don't we? You know, we should. And I was real naive, you know. I mean, what did I know about, you know, education? What I knew about education is I didn't like it and didn't want it, you know, because I come from the last generation of hardcore boarding school, you know, back in the 40s. So, you know, there was nothing, education wasn't a big deal with me. I mean, what was there, you know. So I thought, well, okay, let's walk our talk here. Let's have one, you know. And I was, again, naive. I was thinking maybe, you know, my children and maybe my nieces and nephews and this, you know, little group of, you know, that we can work with. And then man, it took off. As soon as the word went out, you know, we had to get the picture of the children running in the film. The city of Rapid City had a house that they let us use because it was in an area of the town that they were gonna rezone it or do something anyway. So all the houses were empty, but they were real. You know, it was a nice place. So I think they were just afraid of what we might do if you know, I don't know why they did it, but they did it, and we had that house. So we started out with that, you know, and pretty soon we had so many children, but it was really a good learning experience because whatever we did, when we went to court, for example, hearings for people, Wounded Knee court hearings for families and people that were indicted, we took them with us. That's what we did, you know, and we had to, I mean, anything that was in their daily lives that they had a question about, we would research it, and we'd go, like food stamps. That was a big deal back, you know, before they had the cards and all that. Back in the day, you know, everybody kind of knew about that. So then I said, so what is that then? You know, where does that come from? What do you think about it? You know, what are we talking about here? Food stamps, you know? So then those are the kind of issues that we worked with these kids. And then when it came to academics, we just went to the store and got games like Spill and Spell, and they were all card sharks. They could do their numbers and they knew the cars that went by, and they could add it and, you know, all up in their head. You know, they just, whatever was relevant to them is what we did. And of course, it was all about our own history and the events that are happening in Indian country at that time, because our history is relevant. It's every day, you know. So it was an exciting time. It was really a good experience for me, you know. I learned a lot.
Thank you. I think that's a really important lesson too, you know, that we learn from our youth also. You've said that a few times, and I really appreciate you, you know, taking that approach that while you are teaching, you are also learning that it is a community project. So we have a question from Sienna from CSU Long Beach. Her microphone is not connected, so I'm going to ask her question for her. And she was wondering what you believe the first steps or changes are that the government needs to take in order to better serve Native communities overall. You know, what are key issues that would bring about the most benefit right now?
Oh man, everything's a crisis. But I think it's really complicated. People don't think it's complicated, but it really is. Because not all of our people, not all of our indigenous nations in this country have treaty rights. Everybody assumes that, but they don't, okay? And then the ones that they do have, the provisions are different, some of them, whatever. And it's, you know, the how they affect modern day and all of that is individual to each one. So what the federal government did in the past was they took, for example, provisions from many of the treaties of the 1868 era, which was the Dene Navajo Nation and also the Lakota, or you know, Great Sioux Nation, if you will, because that's what the government has in our, you know, documents. So that's how they referred to us. So those provisions over the years, over the decades, eventually became blanket American Indian policies, like IHS, American Indian Health Service, you know, those types of things. All the different social programs and stuff, a lot of those are provisions of treaty rights. And they just made it available to everybody, you know, whether they had the involved in a treaty or not, you know. So because it was colonization tactics, you know, you generalize everything and then everybody's dealing with the same regulations, the same, you know, all of that. So that's colonization. So it's really hard to just specifically say, okay, what the government needs to be done. Basically, what the United States government needs to do is to deal with those of our people that are treaty based, deal with us with nation to nation status, because that's what the treaties are. And the United States government is never going to do that, because then they're going to have to own up to all the land theft. You know, there's cities, places in this country that are sitting on land that doesn't have a title. It was just taken. And they're really worried about that. They get antsy about that, you know. So no matter who's in control of what party's in control, when it filters down to our issues, it's all the same. Because those treaties that were made in the treaty making era were ratified by Congress, that's where the federal government made their mistake, because they're legal. They're legal. They're ratified by Congress. Law of the land. So, you know, they get real nervous and they tiptoe around and try to throw money here, throw money there, have all these programs, you know. God, Indian country has just got programitis. I get so fed up with it, you know. And that's another, you know, foundations of colonization. So we have to constantly battle that mental illness, you know. But yeah, it's just, you know, the federal government just needs to own up to its own laws and start dealing with us on that level. The rest of it is just social stuff, you know, that they can make themselves feel good.
Thank you. Yes, I am seeing more in chat, you know, about land back and honoring treaties. So very important issues, especially that we talk about here at CSUN in American Indian Studies. Beth has some amazing suggestions in the chat for projects to follow. I'll also encourage everybody here on the call. We do have an American Indian Student Association and an American Indian Cultural Center on campus, so you can reach out to our program or to ASA through the university student union clubs, and that's another way to get connected and involved on a local level. And we're just about at 5:30, so I would like to just, you know, say my thanks again to both Madonna and Beth for joining us today, and a big thank you to the USU team and ASA and AIS for having me here to moderate this program. You know, it's such a wonderful film. The link for the film was placed in the chat earlier, so it'll be open for another week for you all to watch it if you haven't had the chance to watch the whole thing already. And, you know, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And yeah, USU team, do you have any other final comments?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much. I'm very, very honored.